Nurses of psych wards, what did a patient do that left you speechless? Probably the saddest was a resident I had a long time ago. This gentleman was a WW2 vet with Alzheimer's and dementia. Probably once or twice a month he would relive some battle he was in. He would literally run up the hallway and grab you and yell at you to get down behind the sandbags. He would then tell you take his Thompson because it was too heavy for him. He would just use his pistol. Then he would get up and run back down the hallway. This guy was old, and seeing him run full sprint like that up and down the hallway during one of his episodes was surreal. I can't imagine having to constantly relive the worst moments of your life where you witnessed and survived the unspeakable horrors of war. In such a situation, would it be wrong to play along? Dealing with ALS patients, you never tell them no. For example, if they talk about their dead family, you don't ever tell them they're dead, because they can literally go through all stages of grief, until of course they forget again. So in situations like experiencing old war scenes, you don't exactly tell them the war isn't happening, but you steer it in a softer direction. We had this one old lady at the nursing home I worked in with Alzheimer's. She thought her wheelchair was her car, and she would regularly stop in the halls and ask for directions. We would give her directions, sending her in a big circle around the facility, and she would motor off, happy as could be, singing with the radio. One of our patients escaped the ward and managed to hitchhike all the way to Sydney, about 900 kilometers. My grandmother worked in a nursing home years back. I remember driving with her the next town over and seeing one of the patients walking down the street in hospital gown that escaped. It is amazing how much energy an 80-year-old dementia patient has. We would put the patient in the car and drive him back to the nursing home. I watched a guy try to remove rats from his rectum. Stated that his ex-girlfriend summoned them there. He ended up tearing his rectal walls to shreds. I really don't know how a human can change from normal, having a GF and such, to what you described. This guy had multiple issues and ultimately had to be restrained and sedated. He was transferred from prison to state hospital. Not a nurse, pharmacist. Had one of our clozapine patients miss a monthly meeting to discuss their medication. Called around, found out she was in the ICU having eaten 2 of her own fingers, then visited her mother for coffee, still bleeding. Had a friend tell me of another patient, made a cut in his thigh and reopened it regularly until the whole thing was a scar tissue cavern, by some miracle avoiding infection. Started using his meat pocket to hold pens and coins and anything he could collect in his ward. Nobody knew until a paperclip pierced the side and he finally wound up with an infection that took him to ICU, where they found his stash. Not a nurse, but I used to be a security guard in a hospital, and we had a patient who self-harmed and cut a hole into themselves around their belly button and then stuck a bunch of paper clips and buttons and things like that into it. We had a gero psych floor. Crazy old people. One night while passing through, a little old lady popped her head out her doorway and said to me, "I could sure use the company of a good-looking young man tonight." "Sorry, I'm not that good-looking." Quick as snot on a doorknob, she said, "That's okay, I can't see too well." I didn't join her, but her charisma was on point. I visited a prison for a warden job and went to see the constant surveillance guys. There was a fella there who had used a razor to slice his stomach open and started pulling chunks of himself out for fun. He also started using the hole, which wouldn't heal, as a hiding place. A towel was found stuffed in there which his body had started fusing to. Apparently he was quite nice, but the whole thing wasn't for me and I didn't go ahead with applying. How the fuck did he get a towel in there? I never asked. Had a nice conversation that same day with a father and son, both in for the same murder. Weird how one act puts these people away, but if you didn't know, you just say the nice people. I'm a tech at a psych hospital, but I start nursing school in August, so I hope this counts. We had a very tall, heavy-set man who swung at a nurse and a fellow tech when they asked him to not stand naked in the door and flash the whole unit, so we put him in a hold and escorted him to the seclusion room. From there he tried to strangle himself with his underwear. He had them on his head like a bandana, so we opened the door and took those away. Then he peed all over the floor, did push-ups, and every time he came down he would slurp it up. Eventually he got bored of that and began writing on the wall in his pee, and then masturbated onto the door and said it would be better if he could fuck my dead corpse. Eventually his IMB 52 clicked in and he contacted for safety, good behavior, so we opened the door again, and he bit me on the hand and drew blood. From there I got permission to not be involved in the code and a peer swapped me out. I'm assaulted on a weekly basis, and we aren't even an acute care facility. I'm very excited to go PRN in August. 0.15.38 per hours is not worth it. 60-something-year-old woman would come out of her room every so often at night topless and holding out her saggy breasts saying in broken English, "My nipples, my nipples, please, for the children." 40-something woman would sneak the shower mat out of the bathroom to put under her bed because she was God, and we were stealing her power by electrocuting her vagina every night. The floor mat apparently stopped this from happening. A severely schizophrenic woman used to tell me that my name was the worst fairy tale lie that she ever wrote in the 2 Bibles for her daddy. When she was angry with me she would yell at me and say, "Get out of here, fairy tale book, one wish I never wrote you." That same woman attacked some nursing students who were attempting to use tissues over lollipops to make ghost props for Halloween. She didn't seem to like this and while trying to hit them was yelling, "You idiots, you can't make ghosts out of lollipops." Again, same woman but different group of nursing students brought in several pizzas for an end of semester party. The woman then walked up and down the tables looking at the pizzas. Then out of nowhere she started throwing the pizza and yelling, "What's this supposed to be? Some kind of pizza test?" I'm not a nurse but was a patient once. Giant dude got upset. One dude changed the channel from a football game he was watching and smashed his skull with his fists. Not fully, but enough that when they brought him back a few days later he started seizing and had to be removed again. Didn't see him again. Also, there was one lady who was straight out of the movies. Walking around preaching the end of days loudly and sweating like crazy. My sister was actually sectioned earlier this year for her eating disorder. She should have been, but that's a story for another time, and she was right next to the PICU psychiatric intensive care unit. One of the nights she heard multiple screams coming specifically from that ward. One of the patients had bit a chunk out of a nurse's leg as they were trying to detain him. They then started eating said chunk. It's crazy to think these types of things happen. Not a nurse, but I was a patient in a psych ward. The ward was sectioned into 2 sides based on case severity. I was on the less severe side. One night, an incredibly tall, somewhat muscular man escaped his room on the severe side, got through a door that was supposed to be locked, got into the less severe side, and into my room. I woke up, Saturday up, and saw him standing in my doorway. He asked in a shaky voice if I was all right. I hesitantly said yes, to which he responded by getting a look of terrified horror and screamed, "I knew it. You can see them too. Don't let them get you," before he was dragged away screaming by security. Guess you're a protagonist now. I've posted about some of these before, but here goes. I'm not a psychologist but a former mental hospital patient. I'm depressive, but was in a closed psychiatric facility in 2 occasions. Once this was because I had myself committed because I was suicidal, and once because there wasn't any space in any other kind of clinic. My roommate watched me brush my teeth on one occasion. While I'm doing this, I realize that he's staring at me. I try to ignore it. Then I realize he's staring at my toothbrush. He then tells me, "You shouldn't stick your lightsaber in your mouth." Okay then. There was a former soldier with PTSD that shared a room with me for a few days. I slept with earplugs during this time because he snored, so I only heard this story from fellow patients, and I'm not sure it wasn't exaggerated, but something close to it must have happened because I did see the destruction afterward. Guy with PTSD can't sleep, so he goes to the duty nurse for sleep meds. Duty nurse at the time was a major asshole, not because she wouldn't give you meds if you asked. After all, she's more qualified than you to decide whether you should be given something or not, but because she treated you like an 8-year-old when you did ask, and not everyone in that facility had the mental faculties of an 8-year-old. Thank you very much. Anyways, she tells him that he can't have sleeping meds, he should try and sleep without them first, so the guy starts pacing up and down in the hallway. She comes and tells him that he needs to go sleep and that he's disturbing other patients, but he ignores her. She grabs him by the arm, and the guy completely flips, breaks the nurse's arm and tosses her into a wall, beats up 2 more hospital staff and 2 policemen that the hospital staff called to the scene. Then the head doctor of the station gets called in. He was off shift when this happened, goes up to the guy telling him something about having a drink with an old comrade, and gives the guy one of those plastic medicine things that look like shot glasses with a massive dose of diazepine or some such. He drinks it and eventually keels over. Again, don't know if it actually went down like this, but I do know the nurse with the broken arm was fired for mistreatment of patients and the hallway looked like it had been the site of a serious fight. The staff was cleaning bloodstains the next morning, the handrails had been ripped out of the wall, and another piece of drywall somewhere looked like someone had been thrown through it. I slept through the whole thing thanks to earplugs. There was one of those sliding fire gates that could be shut by pressing a button that could seal off part of the station, a part that was used for daytime activities, and no one slept in. During the night, 2 manic patients were wandering around because they couldn't sleep, because that happens when you're manic, and one patient shut the other behind the fire door. The patient that was shut in started yelling, "Help, help," in this really eerie voice that convinced other patients the place was haunted. One patient took out his dentures and put them in the dishwasher to clean them. When told that this wasn't a good idea, he cleaned them over the water fountain instead. Some of the saner patients, when we were close to getting released, got permission to go watch a movie at the local theater. We came back home at 11 p.m. and as we walked in, someone made a really good joke, so we were all laughing our asses off. Night security guard sees us trying to get into the elevator and comes running. "What are you doing here?" "We're patients from the psych ward." "Yeah." We ended up basically getting held by the security guard until some hospital staff came along and confirmed we said who we were. We had a lot of fun pretending to actually be insane in the meantime, asking the security guard whether it was normal to be hearing voices and telling him hotel service sucked in this place, and whether this was an airport and at what time the next flight to Timbuktu would leave, etc. etc. I think he was glad to be rid of us at the end. The hospital staff was not amused, but then this wasn't the first thing like this, because a few of us eventually decided we're already in the nut house. This is our chance to do crazy stuff and get away with it, because everyone already thinks we're insane. Doctor later told me that this type of behavior is called hypomania and happens to a decent fraction of patients in the process of recovering from a depression. Basically means you show manic behavior for a short period after recovering from a depression, but this goes away pretty quickly. A different time we got to go out, someone else went and told the hospital staff afterward that I tried to jump in front of a bus. I did no such thing and was feeling well enough that I had absolutely no inclination to do so at the time. I still got 2 hours of one-on-one therapy with the head doctor, who kept telling me that they could only treat me if I was truthful with them, blah, blah, blah. The other patient eventually admitted to lying, luckily. A girl kept spitting water at me over dinner, or splashing me with it. Eventually, I got fed up and dumped a carafe with several liters worth of water on her. Another patient is like, "Hey, wet t-shirt contest." Staff was not amused because they had to clean up the mess. Someone dumped water into every bed on the station. Not a little bit of water, either, but enough to soak them all. No one ever figured out who it was. I had the theory that this was because whoever had done it couldn't remember having done it and was therefore unable to give herself away. Went to step into some elevator at one point, was frantically waved off by a doctor standing inside. Standing inside with the doctor, I only got one glance as the elevator door closed, was someone who'd attempted to slit his throat but bungled the attempt. From the amount of blood, it looked to me like he should have been lying on a stretcher. No idea what was actually going on there, but that image won't leave my mind in a hurry.